welcome to Author Nation, the podcast that propels your author career to new heights. I'm your host, Melody Ann, and I couldn't be more thrilled to have you join us today. In this episode, we are talking about hybrid publishing. What exactly is hybrid publishing and who is it for? Our mission here is to empower you to make the right decision for you in your publishing journey. And as a member of Author Nation, you can unlock a treasure trove of resources at authornation.online. You can find anything from writing prompts, help with planning your book, and even a promotion checklist. All right. As I said, we're talking about hybrid publishing. So grab a beverage, get comfortable, and let's dig in because this is important for your author career. And my guest today, Tanya, is the CEO of Greenleaf Book Group's growth efforts, and she fosters a culture built around serving authors. Prior to this role, Tanya worked directly with Greenleaf's authors, developed publishing strategies, including multiple New York Times bestsellers. She spearheaded growth strategies, including Greenleaf's ebook program and the River Grove Digital First imprint. And she built Greenleaf's distribution organization, working with retailers and wholesalers to develop one of the fastest growing distribution businesses in the industry. Before joining the publishing industry, Tanya worked in digital media and as a television producer for Extra and E! Entertainment Television. I remember both of those. Tanya is the author of Ideas, Influence, and Income, which is a comprehensive guide to writing, publishing, and launching your book and monetizing your content. Welcome, Tanya Hall. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Let's start with the basic question of what is hybrid publishing?
Yeah, so as the name infers, hybrid publishing is a blend between self-publishing and traditional publishing. So the idea is that it's taking some of the characteristics from the self-publishing side and bringing the best of those forward while also grabbing the best characteristics of the traditional publishing side and blending those into one new sort of business model, or at least for our industry, relatively new.
Yeah, exactly. So what's the difference? Like what differentiates hybrid from, let's say, traditional or partner publishing?
So with traditional publishing, typically for my business authors, I try to make the comparison of that's like venture capital. Somebody else is investing money in your book, and therefore you're going to give up a little bit of control or maybe a lot of control. And you're also not going to keep as much for each book sold on the back end because they're shouldering the risk. It's all about who's taking the risk. On the self-publishing side and in the hybrid publishing side, the author is the one who's subsidizing the work. There's lots of different business models within the hybrid category, but the author's investing. And because of that, they have the creative control, they retain intellectual property rights, and they keep a much larger royalty on the back end.
That makes sense. So as a hybrid publisher, do you publish anything or do you choose books that you publish? And if you do choose books, how does that work?
We choose books. We've been doing this for over 25 years. So we've been very careful to protect our brand by picking the books that we know we can sell. So that, yes, that means we leave money on the table sometimes, but it also means that in the end, our authors are happy and we're happy too, because we have book sales as well as the service revenue that supports the business. So we're really looking for not just quality content and an author who's willing to support the book, which is what every publisher is looking for. But we're also looking for someone who can work in our more collaborative business model. And finally, a book that really aligns with our sales channels. And that's a big one because we do tremendous business with airports, for instance. And over the years, we've just really developed strong relationships with what I would call prescriptive nonfiction. So our list is heavily business, self-help, health and wellness, family, parenting, that type of thing. Books that help you live a better life or become a better person.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Airports. That's a good, if you don't have a book, right, and you're walking through an airport, you're a bit of a captive audience, aren't you? If you really 100%. Want one. So yeah, that's actually a really good distribution idea. So I know that in the hybrid world, there are some industry standards. And I don't think every hybrid publisher has to follow them, but I'm aware of them. So can you just talk a little bit about how can an author know which hybrid publisher they should work with? How do they know that the hybrid publisher is going to help them get the right content? And also production value, like, the quality of a book's really important, right? So can you talk a little bit about, from the author side, how do they pick the right hybrid publisher?
It's a great question, and a very important one for obvious reasons. Having the right partner in this very sort of invested undertaking of writing and launching a book is critical. So the Independent Book Publishers Association of America, IBPA, did a wonderful job developing standards for the hybrid book name, let's say, because all of a sudden, all of these hybrid publishers were popping up and there were no standards. And so just as you're describing, authors were like, I don't know one from the other. So how do I figure out who's the best partner? So it's things like a hybrid publisher should be publishing on their imprint with their own ISBNs, for instance. The royalties that we touched on earlier, they should be more aggressive than you would see in another type of deal where the author is not investing. There's a trade-off that you have, right? Distribution is key. They should have either distribution in-house. So Greenleaf, for instance, we are a distributor as well as a publisher, but other hybrid publishers will outsource that to a third party. And that's fine as long as there's somebody proactively championing your book and it's not just being listed on Ingram in a database, which some people will call distribution, but it is not distribution.
Oh, thank you for saying that. Yes, that's such an important key piece. Some of the things that authors come to me, they say, I found a publisher and they feel like they're being traditionally published, but they're paying. So I have to sit down and explain to them. It's like traditional publishers tend to give you an advance. Hybrid publishers, you give them the advance, And they, and they say, it's being distributed everywhere. And I said, no, it's sitting in an Ingram Spark catalog everywhere, right? It's not actually being distributed. So can you just kind of reemphasize that for me and just, clarify any kind of myths that you see authors falling into in that regard?
Yeah. So the point there is that if you really want to take a run at wide distribution, which most authors do, then you need a publisher who is either a distributor as well as a publisher, or has a partnership where they're outsourcing distribution to a trusted partner. And even then, that trusted partner needs to have a sales force. So that's the question to ask. Do you have a sales force? And they should be able to describe that sales force to you. If somehow that conversation leads you to, oh, well, it's listed where it's available around the world and libraries can order it and bookstores can order it. Sure, along with millions and millions of other books, but there's nobody pushing the book out there, which is critical to getting it onto shelves.
Absolutely, because as you talked about the standards, there is an organization in the UK that looked at kind of the hybrid publishers outside the standards, and apparently the average number of books sold by authors they interviewed or did a survey with was 68.
Oh my.
Books. Yeah, 60. So they've paid, 300 or 10,000 pounds. This is in England, of course, up to I think it was between 3,000 and 10,000 pounds were how much people had paid. And the average had sold 68 books. And that's because distribution means it's on Ingram Spark, not it's in the stores, right? So, yeah, interesting. And you talked about publishing and distribution. And so if you would just very quickly define those two, because I think that a lot of self-published authors think it's the same thing.
Yes. And I'll be careful not to go down a rabbit hole here because distribution is my background at Greenleaf. I built that part of the business and it's very complicated actually. But when we speak broadly about publishing, we're really talking about production, right? Producing the book, getting it to where it's printed, or at least if it's, in a print-on-demand model, it's available to be printed, versus distribution is the, again, proactive selling of the book and all the logistics that follow that, the shipping and the warehousing and the returns, the supply chain management, really. But distribution is, again, just a critical part of a book's launch and its ongoing success.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. Because it's one of the things that I find authors aren't quite differentiating the two. And there is a big difference between getting your book ready and getting it into the hands of readers, right? Thank you. And so talking about distribution, that, kind of really great segue because it falls right into the idea of marketing, right? So distribution is a piece of the marketing puzzle. And so how involved should a hybrid publisher be in marketing? Is there a standard in that, or is that a question you should be asking as an author?
It's definitely a question to ask because they're all different, right? So given that it's largely fee for service, they are probably going to come to the table with options. And then it's up to the author to evaluate, well, I've already got strength on my team, for instance, with social media, and I can handle that. But I might benefit from using their industry advertising connections, things like that, where maybe you've got a steeper learning curve as an author because it's not your business. So it's probably going to be a menu of things. But, I think if there's any one point that I can't emphasize enough as I'm talking with authors, it's that the marketing's really hard. So don't cut corners on marketing. It's just critical to get your ducks in a row early and be strategic so that your book can succeed.
Yeah. And what about Greenleaf? What does, tell us a little bit about, if an author comes to you, what does that relationship look like? What is the process like? What kind of marketing might they expect? I know their book will be in airports.
It might be in airports. I can't guarantee that, actually. Fair. But we do pretty well with it, however. So with Greenleaf, of course, we have a vetting process on the front end, as would any legitimate hybrid publishers. So we're looking for the stuff that we can sell, as I mentioned earlier. And then from there, we go through an editorial diagnosis to make sure that we're all of one mind in how we see this book going to market. And if everything aligns at that point and the author is comfortable with the investment, because there is some risk for the author here, of course, then we move forward with what really looks almost like a traditional publishing process, right? So they're going all the way through editorial and design. They have a project manager who's shepherding them. And then there's a print buyer who's brokering printing. And we have distribution and marketing. Again, distribution, they'll always have someone championing their book. The marketing piece is going to vary depending on what the author decided made sense for them. But the other point I like to make to authors is that with distribution period, because books are sold 100% returnable, they're effectively consignment. So we need that author to come to the table on top of what we're doing to push the book out there, or the books just come back, right? We have two sales that have to happen. And the first is on the publisher or distributor. We're going to get it out onto shelves. And then the second sale is really on the author's back. Like, you've got to get readers into the stores to take it off the shelves and bring it home.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. So one thing you definitely offer is the distribution side, and then marketing is more of a menu that you'll work with the author on. I love that. And I just want to, I'm saying it again and just clarifying it, because authors listening, that's the other thing where I think they get a little confused, right? It's like, if you're doing distribution, then the marketing's done. And the whole idea of publishing is one piece, distribution is one piece. It's part of the marketing, because part of marketing is getting it on the shelf. But then there's the marketing side, getting it into the hands of readers, getting them to buy it and not return it and whatnot, right? So I just wanted to break that down for people so it's super clear, because I noticed that can be very confusing. I mean, honestly, the publishing industry is so confusing. You have so many different choices as an author, and nobody sits down with you and explains it. So I like to really just, lay things out nice and clearly for people. Just, it's my audience. I like to make sure my audience is super clear. So tell me a success story. I'd love to hear, maybe one of your favorite authors or a surprise success story from Greenleaf Book Group.
I'll tell you one of my favorite success stories, which is for an author who's not only a brilliant writer, but a beautiful person. So her name is Mary Lou Quinlan. And she worked with us twice. The first time was a business book called What She's Not Telling You, which is fascinating, by the way. And it's about marketing to women and the nuances of marketing to women. Just a fascinating read. So she was successful with that book, and she's written other business books with traditional houses in the past. So that was actually an easy one for us to sell in. Well, then her mother passed away unexpectedly. And Mary Lou, as an only child, she went about cleaning out her mother's house. And in the closets, she found baskets and boxes full of little notes and receipts, and very much a let go, let God kind of thing, where her mom was basically documenting the progress of her life through these little prayers that she was writing And Mary Lou was so touched by this and just so moved, I think, emotionally by the entire experience that she wrote a book called The God Box. Fast forward, that book became one of our New York Times bestsellers. And that book was such a passion project for her. And she was adamant that when she called me in the fall, we publish it for Mother's Day. And I said, Mary Lou, that is really rushing things. Like for authors who haven't experienced this, we don't move that fast. But we did it. We really crashed this book, as we say, so that she would have it out by Mother's Day. And she is just a pistol when it came to marketing. And she just blew my socks off with everything that she put behind this book, including a one-woman show off Broadway. It's just amazing. So the day that I got to call her to give her the wonderful news that she was a New York Times bestseller, she was in New York at a restaurant. And I said, Mary Lou, are you sitting down? And she said, I can be. And so I said, you are a New York Times best-selling author. And she started screaming in the restaurant, I'm a New York Times best-selling. And you could hear the whole restaurant clapping for her. I'm crying. She's crying.
Oh, that's brilliant.
I love it. It still makes me smile to this day. And that was a good number of years ago. But it's a lovely book. And she's just a beautiful person. So always nice to see things like that happen to good people.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's brilliant. And how important is it in your mind to get on a bestseller list? And tell us a little bit about the bestseller lists from your perspective and what, is that important? I mean, it's a certain nice to have.
Yes.
But what does it do for the author career or the book sales or?
It's a really good question. It's a little bit nuanced. I write about it a lot in my book, actually. For somebody who's a professional speaker, being able to say that you're a best-selling author, especially if it's Wall Street Journal or New York Times, that does add something. It helps you stand out. It's a legitimizer, right? Yeah. Your Amazon bestseller campaigns, the only reason those are meaningful at all is because they do affect the search algorithm on Amazon. It can help you to be more discoverable, but none of them de facto sell more books, right? Being on a bestsellers list is never going to help you sell more books. And I tell authors that, and they argue with me and they say I'm wrong, and I prove them incorrect time and time again.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, no, well said, well said. You mentioned your book. So you have a book. It is called Ideas, Influence, and Income, written by Tanya Hall. So in ideasinfluenceincome.com is where you'll find information about it. Tanya, can you tell us about this book?
Yeah, so this book came about after my staff for years said to me, well, why don't you write a book? Because you're the one out there telling people to plant your flag as a thought leader. You really should have a book. And then I hadn't done it. So this sort of three-legged stool of ideas, influence, and income is how I always talk to authors about how to strategically think about publishing their book. So I don't really get into the nuts and bolts of the writing process so much as I do thinking about how to differentiate your idea, kind of market testing it. That's the ideas section, getting past some of the fears that can sometimes hold us up during that process. Yeah. The influence section is very much about building your author platform, getting the word out, creating community so that you've got that ready group of people who want to buy your book when it comes out. And then everybody's favorite section, income, is about obviously how to monetize the book, not just through book sales. And this is mostly for nonfiction authors, by the way, but how to then sort of repurpose a lot of that intellectual property into other formats so that you can get the most bang out of this big investment that you made in writing a book.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And if you're interested, ideasinfluenceandincome.com is where you'll find more information. And just so everyone knows, if you're looking for a hybrid publisher, you can go to greenleafbookgroup.com and find them there. All right, Tanya, what would you say your top three if you could give 3 pieces of advice to authors, what would those 3 pieces of advice be?
Sure. I think one of my favorite pieces of advice to give that also always makes authors sort of take a step back and think about things differently is to think about the fact that you are asking your potential reader to give you not $20, right? $20 is really not an expensive product. You're asking them to give you 2 weeks of their time at least. And when authors think about it that way, they think, wow, that's a significant investment by my reader and I better do right by them. So it really can influence the way you think about writing to your audience. So that would be a big one. You're asking for 2 weeks, not $20. The second is just the importance of doing your homework about your publishing partner. Make sure that there is distribution with a proactive sales force out there championing your book, so you don't do all of this for nothing. And then thirdly, I would say be strategic. Take the time on the front end, even though I know it's very exhausting to write a book. Then you've got to sit down and put out basically a product launch plan. Like writing and launching a book is still a product launch. And we don't like to think about this passionate thing like a product, but it is a product. So be strategic, have a plan, and start planning really early. Like I would say at least a year before your book comes out to make sure that you've taken advantage of every opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I just want to just dig into that third one just a little bit. A lot of, and I see it out there all the time. Write your book in a weekend. Get your book out in 7 days, 30 days to becoming a best-selling author, and da 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 da. And it drives me nuts, because if you have a book out in 30 days, you haven't sent any advance review copies. You aren't getting those advance reviews. Nobody has had time to write you a beautiful foreword. You know, like there's all these pieces that are left out of the equation. And then I don't know how much you've spent on your 30 days to Amazon bestseller, but you're probably not going to sell more than 68 books, right? So can you just speak a little bit more to that? It's really in that third point. If you just a little bit more on that, I'd really appreciate it as a wrap up.
Yes, I agree with what you said 100%. I see those ads and I want to bang my head on the wall, because no, it's not a 30-day process. Okay. You have to have some patience to do this right. But yeah, I think when authors think about the fact that this book is an extension of their brand, would you rebrand your company in 30 days? Probably not. So you really have to take the time to do it right, because it's hard to undo. Once it's out there in the world and it's made an impression, better or worse, on people, it's really hard to peel that back. It's practically impossible to get books removed from Amazon, even when they're out of print. So just remember that it's making a lasting impact, and your launch day is a one-time event. So you really want something that you can be proud of, that really shows off your lifetime of work in many cases. So it breaks my heart when authors come to me and they've done one of these, what I call shotgun publishing programs, and they say, gee, I don't have any distribution. And I look at it and say, well, sorry, you have to start over, because it's just not workable. So
it's not workable. Yeah. Thank you so much, Tanya. I really appreciate that, because this is something that drives me crazy. It's like there's all this opportunity you're throwing away as well in marketing when you just slap something together. This is your legacy. A book is a legacy. It's forever, right? As you said. So thank you very much, Tanya. I really, really appreciate you today. Do you have any final words you want to say before we sign off?
Final words, I guess another just sort of word of warning would be beware of magical thinking. I think it can creep in for any author. I've seen authors do it. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've seen authors do it myself, and they think, wow, writing a book was so hard, and I did this wonderful hard thing. And the universe rewards people who do those wonderful hard things. And then they sit back and wait for the magic to happen. And we all know that that's really when the work just starts on the marketing side. I did it myself when I wrote my book, and I was shocked that I arrived at that place. And thank God I recognized it quickly and course corrected. But you really have to be constantly reminding yourself that the marketing piece requires ongoing energy. And if you're not going to bring that to the table, make sure you've got a team behind you that can help support it.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tanya. I've really appreciated your time today and all your amazing gems. Super appreciate you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you for listening in today. I really appreciate you. I hope that you have found this enlightening and instructional, right? Like this is a really important piece of your book project. It's not just writing it. There's all those other pieces. So thank you very much for joining in today. If you've enjoyed this, please give us a rating and a review and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. All right. I will see you next time. And until then, keep writing, keep telling your stories, and keep thriving.